trusted her completely. My wife's nurse, the person we welcomed into our lives. But what I discovered about her obsession would change everything and put my family at risk. I remember the day I realized my life was perfect. It wasn't some grand event or flashy achievement. It was quieter than that. It was sitting on the balcony of our little apartment, Arushi leaning against my shoulder, her hand gently resting on her growing belly, and realizing that in that exact moment, nothing could touch us. We had met 6 years ago, in a cafe that smelled of roasted coffee and old books. I had spilled my latte on her notebook. The irony of it still makes me laugh. But that accident started something neither of us expected. Conversations turned into laughter, laughter turned into late-night walks, and late-night walks turned into a love I thought only existed in movies. Arushi was magic. Not the kind that made sparks fly or the kind that demanded attention. She had a quiet light. The kind that made people want to be better just by standing near her. Her laugh could lift my heaviest moods. Her touch could calm the most restless nights. And when we found out we were going to have a child, it felt like the world had finally recognized that our love deserved a new chapter. I remember that first ultrasound like it was yesterday, watching our baby on the screen, hearing the tiny heartbeat, feeling Arushi's hand squeeze mine so tight I thought I might crush her fingers. It was the most terrifying, exhilarating, and beautiful moment of my life. We didn't need anyone else in that room, just the three of us. Us, and this little miracle we had created. The weeks that followed were filled with the kind of small, perfect moments that make a life feel cinematic. Grocery shopping turned into playful debates over what we would feed our baby. Arushi insisted on picking organic vegetables even though I pretended to complain, and I secretly loved that she cared so much. We painted the nursery together. Soft yellow walls, tiny shelves for books we hadn't bought yet, a mobile hanging over the crib. Everything was a promise of a life we were building with our hands, together. And then there was the hospital. We had chosen a private clinic, recommended by friends who raved about the staff. I was excited, anxious, and admittedly a little naive about the people who would be caring for my wife and child. Among the staff was Nisha, the nurse assigned to Arushi's care during her pregnancy. At first, she seemed like a blessing. Polite, attentive, always cheerful. She offered advice, checked in regularly, and somehow made the whole medical routine feel less intimidating. I trusted her. I really did. And at that moment, in our little bubble of excitement and anticipation, I never questioned anyone's intentions. I didn't see the shadows behind the smiles, the quiet envy lurking beneath seemingly kind gestures. The nights before labor were the hardest. Arushi would toss and turn, nerves getting the better of her. I would sit by her side, holding her hand, whispering that everything would be fine, even when my own heart raced with worry. We talked endlessly about names, whether our child would have my last name, whether Arushi's middle name should be included, or if we should choose something entirely unique. Every argument, every laugh, every shared memory in those nights was a stitch in the tapestry of our perfect life. One night, as I was dozing off in the chair next to her, I saw her looking at me with that soft, dreamy smile she reserved only for moments like this. She whispered, "Promise me we'll always protect them. Our little one. No matter what." I squeezed her hand and nodded. "Always," I said, unaware that those words would soon be tested in ways I couldn't imagine. I thought we were ready for anything. But life has a way of showing you cracks where you thought there was only strength. The perfect life I had built with Arushi was fragile, and I was about to discover just how fragile it could be. It all started with small things. A miscommunication here, a sudden delay there. Nisha, always cheerful, started appearing more often during Arushi's appointments. She would hover just a little too long, ask questions that seemed unnecessary, and sometimes offer advice that contradicted what our doctor had said. I brushed it off. I wanted to trust her. After all, she was supposed to help us. She had that badge of authority, that uniform that screamed care and responsibility. But one evening, as Arushi and I were leaving the hospital, I noticed her looking at us strangely. Not the friendly, professional smile I was used to, but something sharp, calculating. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something in her eyes made me uneasy. I shook it off as paranoia. I had no reason to suspect anyone, or so I thought. The nights grew harder. Arushi's labor was approaching, and the excitement mixed with anxiety created a constant buzz in our home. I stayed up late, reading everything I could about childbirth, prenatal care, and ways to support her. Every night, I whispered words of encouragement, held her hand through cramps, and tried to calm the racing heartbeat I often felt in my chest. And then the day came, the day our lives were supposed to change forever, for the better. Arushi went into labor early in the morning. The hospital staff moved efficiently, and I stayed by her side, holding her hand through every contraction, every tense moment. Nisha was there too, smiling and guiding us, her presence so constant, it almost felt like she had become part of our little family. I had no reason to doubt her. I still didn't. Not yet. That was the beginning of the storm. The moment when the cracks I had ignored, the shadows I had overlooked, began to reveal themselves. The perfect life I thought I had was about to be tested in ways I never imagined. Because love, no matter how strong, can't always shield you from betrayal. And deceit, no matter how cleverly hidden, eventually comes to light. Looking back now, I can see the first hints of what was coming. The small gestures that didn't add up, the questions that seemed innocent but carried weight, the way Nisha's eyes lingered a second too long. At the time, I didn't understand. I wanted to believe in the goodness of people. I wanted to protect Arushi's peace and my own. But some truths have a way of breaking through, no matter how deeply you bury them. And I was about to learn one of the cruelest truths of my life, a truth that would make me question everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and the people we invite into our lives. After the early excitement of Arushi's pregnancy, I began to notice how deeply Nisha involved herself in our lives. At first, I thought it was kindness, her way of showing dedication. She would call to check on Arushi, asking if she was sleeping well, if she had eaten, if the baby's kicks were consistent. I appreciated it. Who doesn't like someone caring enough to notice the small things? But soon it began to feel different. Nisha would linger longer than necessary during appointments. She asked questions that didn't need answers. Are you sure you're managing your stress? Or, do you think he's taking good enough care of you? Every time her tone suggested worry, but it was the kind of worry that felt invasive rather than helpful. I dismissed it at first. I thought maybe she was just thorough, conscientious, the kind of nurse every patient hoped to have. I remember one evening, Arushi had mild back pain. We called Nisha for advice. Instead of suggesting simple stretches or contacting our doctor, she insisted on coming over herself. She arrived within the hour, cheerful, and seemingly concerned, carrying a bag of medical tools I didn't even recognize. She examined Arushi carefully, asked her questions, noted down observations in a notebook she had brought. I watched from the corner of the room, feeling a mix of gratitude and unease. Nisha smiled at me, said, I'm just making sure everything is perfect for the baby. You know, first pregnancies can be unpredictable. She laughed lightly, but the look in her eyes, there was something sharp there. I ignored it, blaming my imagination. Over the next few weeks, Nisha's presence became almost constant. She would call at odd hours, text messages filled with tips I didn't request, reminders for appointments, or advice on things I hadn't thought to ask. Arushi, naturally trusting and polite, welcomed her guidance, often insisting, see? She really cares, doesn't she? I wanted to trust her. I wanted to believe that a stranger could genuinely care so much for a couple she had never met before. But little things started adding up. One afternoon, while Arushi napped, I stayed behind in the hospital to ask a nurse about a medication. I overheard Nisha speaking to another staff member in hushed tones. She was smiling, almost smugly, while describing how she had handled a situation perfectly. The words were vague, but the tone made my stomach churn. I couldn't understand what she meant, and when I approached her later, she laughed it off. Just hospital stuff, you worry too much? I shook my head, trying to let it go. But that was the first seed of doubt. The next week, I noticed something else. Small inconsistencies. A note from Nisha about Arushi's condition didn't match the doctor's report. A supposed checkup she claimed to have performed was never recorded in the official file. These might have been simple mistakes, but something about the way she presented them felt intentional, calculated. I tried to bring it up with Arushi, but she waved me off, saying, you're imagining things. She's just being thorough. I wanted to argue, to insist, but I didn't. Part of me wanted to protect her peace. I wanted to believe, just a little longer. Then there was the night she stayed late after one of Arushi's appointments. I had returned to the apartment, expecting Arushi to be relaxed. Instead, I found her unusually quiet, staring at the ceiling. What's wrong? I asked, sitting beside her. She shook her head. Nothing. Just tired. I wanted to press further, but I hesitated. Sometimes pregnancy fatigue can make you distant. But deep down, I sensed it wasn't just tiredness. There was unease, a tension that hadn't been there before Nisha became so involved. Over the following days, I started paying more attention. Nisha's questions, her presence, her insistence on being in control of every minor decision. It was suffocating, but in a way that felt almost invisible. She would say things like, I just want to make sure nothing goes wrong, and smile at me, as if I should be grateful for her vigilance. I found myself nodding, even as my instincts screamed caution. One afternoon, while I waited outside the ultrasound room, I saw her speaking to a colleague in a tone that was far too animated. She was laughing softly, but pointing toward the waiting area. Something in the way she looked at Arushi, and then at me, made my stomach tighten. For the first time, I felt fear. A subtle, creeping fear I didn't want to acknowledge. I thought about leaving it alone, convincing myself I was overreacting. After all, she was a nurse. She was trained to care for patients. Who was I to judge her motives? But that nagging feeling wouldn't go away. There were moments when I saw her too close, too involved, and the way she looked at Arushi, it wasn't just concern. There was something else. A possessiveness. A quiet obsession that made my skin crawl. I didn't want to see it, but my gut knew. Something was off. And then came the day that changed everything. Arushi had a routine checkup scheduled, and I accompanied her as usual. Nisha arrived early, unusually cheerful, almost glowing as she greeted us. She made small talk, asked about our weekend plans, and checked Arushi's vitals with meticulous attention. Everything seemed normal. Too normal. It was when she left the room for a moment to retrieve something from her bag that I saw it. A small folded note peeking out from her coat pocket. I didn't touch it, but curiosity got the better of me, and I glanced just enough to see a few words. Make sure he never gets her. My heart skipped a beat. I shook my head, thinking I had imagined it. Surely I was reading too much into something innocent, but I couldn't shake it. That evening, I lay awake while Arushi slept, her hand resting on her belly, and thought about all the subtle signs I had ignored. Her constant presence, the inconsistent reports, the smug smiles when I wasn't looking. The fear began to grow, whispering in my mind, she's not here to help us. She's here for something else. I tried to suppress it. I wanted to protect Arushi, to believe in the goodness of people. But deep inside, I knew that trust, once questioned, could never be the same again. And for the first time, I realized that the person we had invited into our lives, someone we believed would safeguard our most precious moments, might be the very person threatening them. The perfect life we had built, the anticipation of our child, the joy of expecting, it now had a shadow lurking over it. And I had no idea how deep that shadow went, or how far Nisha was willing to go to see her plan unfold. That night, as I held Arushi's hand and watched her sleep, I promised myself one thing. No matter what, I would protect her. I would uncover the truth, even if it broke my heart to see it. Because sometimes, the people you trust the most are the ones who betray you in the cruelest ways. The day started like any other, but deep down I knew it wouldn't end that way. Arushi had been having mild contractions all afternoon, but they were irregular. So we spent the day pacing the apartment, packing the hospital bag one last time, and reminding ourselves to stay calm. By evening, the contractions grew stronger, and we finally knew the moment had arrived. I could feel my chest tightening with a mixture of excitement and fear. This was it, the moment we had been waiting for, the moment that would change our lives forever. We arrived at the hospital, and everything seemed normal at first. The staff moved efficiently, greeting us politely. But there she was, Nisha, smiling that same unnervingly calm smile. She greeted us warmly, offered assistance, and seemed almost eager. I brushed the thought aside. This was the hospital, after all. She had been with us the whole pregnancy. What could possibly go wrong? As Arushi was checked into the labor room, Nisha stayed by her side, guiding her through each step. "You're doing great," she said, her voice soft, almost comforting. I held Arushi's hand, whispering words of encouragement, trying to suppress the growing sense of unease I felt. The hours crawled by. Contractions came harder, stronger, and more frequent. I was there every second, holding Arushi's hand, wiping her forehead, whispering that she was stronger than she knew. Nisha hovered, giving instructions, adjusting blankets, checking vitals. She seemed helpful, professional, caring. Too helpful, too professional, I realized, as I watched the way she moved with precision that bordered on controlling. And then, the first red flag appeared. During a brief pause in the labor, Nisha asked for a tray of medications. She moved quickly, her hands shaking slightly, but with a controlled calm that felt rehearsed. She gave Arushi a dose, explaining it as standard procedure, but when the attending doctor arrived to check, the dosage didn't match the prescription. I noticed it immediately. "Wait," I said, my voice tight. "Is that the correct dose?" Nisha smiled, placing a reassuring hand on Arushi's shoulder. "Of course. Don't worry, it's all under control." But the doctor frowned, double-checking the chart, and gave a subtle shake of the head. Arushi's eyes were wide, searching mine, and I realized she didn't know what was happening. My blood ran cold. Something was wrong. As the night wore on, the labor intensified. Nisha's behavior became even more controlling. She insisted on certain positions, delayed the doctor for minor things, and constantly checked Arushi's vitals with almost obsessive attention. Every suggestion she made seemed to push us toward discomfort rather than relief. At one point, I noticed her glance at me, a quick, almost imperceptible look that sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't concern I saw in her eyes. It was calculation. Then came the moment that made my heart pound with terror. Arushi's contractions spiked suddenly, and she cried out in pain. I reached for her hand, but Nisha stepped in, gently but firmly guiding her into a position that made her scream even more. "Trust me," Nisha whispered, her smile calm. "This will help." Something in me snapped. I could no longer ignore the instinct gnawing at the back of my mind. I demanded the attending doctor check Arushi immediately. The doctor's swift action stabilized her, but the fear in my chest didn't subside. Later, during a quiet moment when Arushi was resting between contractions, I confronted Nisha subtly. "Why did you delay the doctor?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She laughed lightly, a sound that didn't reach her eyes. "I was just making sure everything was perfect. You should relax. Stress is the last thing your wife needs right now." I nodded, but the knot in my stomach tightened. I wanted to trust her. I really did, but everything about that night screamed danger. Hours passed, and the labor continued. Nisha was always nearby, guiding, instructing, hovering. Every time the doctor or a nurse entered, she was quick to explain, quick to intervene, almost as if she wanted to be the authority in the room. I could see the tension in the other nurses, subtle glances, small sighs. They respected her competence but seemed wary of her intensity. Then, just as the baby's arrival neared, the final moment of terror came. Arushi was exhausted, screaming in pain, and I was holding her hand, willing her to keep going. Nisha was by her side, giving instructions that seemed unnecessary, pushing her toward positions that made her struggle more than necessary. I grabbed her wrist gently but firmly. "Stop. Let her breathe. Let the doctor take over." Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp and calculating, then softened into that practiced calm. "Of course, anything for the baby," she said. The doctor took over, and within minutes, Arushi gave a final push. The room filled with the cry of our baby, a sound I had dreamed of for months. Relief washed over me in waves, and I kissed Arushi's forehead, whispering, "We did it. We're safe." And in that moment, as I held our child for the first time, I looked at Nisha. Her smile was wide, But her eyes held something I had seen before, a flicker of triumph that didn't belong in that room. I didn't know it then, but that night marked the true beginning of the storm. The first dangerous act had been done, subtle but deliberate, testing boundaries, testing trust. Nisha had stepped into our lives under the guise of care, but her intentions were darker than I could have imagined. As I held Arushi and our newborn, exhausted but overwhelmed with love, a small part of me shivered with unease. I didn't understand what had just happened, but I knew one thing for certain. The person we had trusted the most was hiding something, and it was only a matter of time before the truth revealed itself in ways I could never have imagined. The days after Arushi's labor should have been the happiest of our lives. We had a healthy baby, and every moment seemed like a dream. The tiny fingers gripping ours, the little coos and yawns, the soft warmth of our child curled against Arushi. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. At first, I tried to dismiss it. After all, the hospital was busy. There were countless procedures and checks, and Nisha had been there the entire time. She had been so helpful, so attentive. How could I question her? But the doubts had a voice of their own, persistent and insistent. It started with small details, a chart that didn't match the doctor's notes, a medication schedule that had been adjusted without explanation. Nisha always seemed to appear at the right moment, hovering just slightly too close, her eyes flickering to me with an intensity I couldn't place. One evening, as Arushi slept, I stayed in the nursery rocking our baby. I noticed a folder left on the counter, a report Nisha had apparently filled out earlier that day. My curiosity got the better of me, and I threw it. Some of the entries didn't add up. Minor details, but enough that my gut tightened in a way it hadn't before. A note about Arushi's vitals was slightly off, a timestamp that didn't make sense, a comment about a procedure I was certain hadn't happened. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. Was I imagining things? Or had someone really interfered in the one moment of our lives that should have been sacred, safe, unbroken? I decided to ask the doctor directly. "Dr. Mehra," I said quietly after visiting hours, "can we review Arushi's medication schedule?" I noticed a few discrepancies. The doctor glanced at me, raising an eyebrow. "Discrepancies?" I showed him the notes. His expression shifted subtly from surprise to concern. You're right," he said after a moment. "Some of these entries don't match our records. I'll look into it." That was all the confirmation I needed. My doubts were no longer whispers. Something had happened. Something deliberate. I tried not to panic, not to alarm Arushi. She had endured enough already. But I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in my chest. Someone we trusted, someone so close, might have put her in danger. Over the next few days, I observed Nisha more closely. Her behavior was meticulous, almost rehearsed. She was always cheerful, always helpful. But there were subtle things. The way she would glance at the charts before handing them to the doctor, the quick movements to adjust medication or notes, the small smile when I wasn't looking. I started keeping my own records, jotting down times, observations, anything that seemed out of place. Every small action she took, I noted. My notebook grew thick with details, a tapestry of inconsistencies and suspicion. And then came the conversations. "Are you sure you're resting enough?" Nisha would ask Arushi, lingering in the room longer than necessary. "It's important to stay calm for the baby. Stress can affect milk production, bonding." Her words were innocent enough, but the way she said them, the subtle emphasis, the way her eyes scanned me when I was nearby, sent chills down my spine. She wasn't just caring, she was watching, calculating. One night, after everyone else had left, I finally spoke to Arushi about my concerns. "Nisha," I started cautiously, "have you noticed anything strange?" Arushi shook her head. "What do you mean?" "She's been kind, helping with everything." "I know," I said, my voice low. "But I saw some notes, some medication changes that didn't make sense. I think we need to be careful." Her brow furrowed. "Are you saying she's dangerous?" "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I'm going to find out." From that moment, I became vigilant. I checked every note, every dosage, every instruction. I cross-referenced everything with the doctor. Each inconsistency deepened my unease. I started researching her background quietly, asking discreet questions among the hospital staff, trying to understand who Nisha really was. She had a clean record on paper, but the more I dug, the more I realized that paper could only tell so much. And then I found it. A small, almost hidden detail that made my stomach turn. A name on a social media account. A photo that looked oddly familiar, and a date that coincided with an event in my past. I didn't understand its full significance yet, but I knew it was a clue. A thread I had to pull. I spent nights awake, holding our baby, staring at Arushi as she slept, trying to reconcile the love and trust I had for her with the growing suspicion that someone we invited into our lives might have intended to harm us. I didn't know the full story yet. I didn't know how deep the betrayal went, or how personal it was, but I felt it in my bones. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake. Someone had tried to manipulate our lives, our family, our most precious moments. And I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't let it go unchecked. The first doubts had taken root, but they would grow into a determination that I could no longer ignore. The person we trusted, the person we believed had our best interests at heart, had secrets, dangerous secrets, and I was going to uncover every last one of them. Because love isn't just about joy. Sometimes it's about vigilance. Sometimes it's about facing truths that are harder than pain itself. And the truth about Nisha was about to change everything. I couldn't sleep that night. The baby's soft breathing, Arushi's quiet presence, even the rhythmic ticking of the nursery clock couldn't calm my racing mind. My thoughts kept returning to Nisha, to the inconsistencies, the subtle manipulation, the controlling behavior. Something about her didn't sit right, and I needed answers, no matter how uncomfortable they might be. The first thing I did was start asking around, discreetly. I didn't want to alarm Arushi, and I didn't want to tip off Nisha. I began talking to hospital staff who had worked with her for years, people who had seen her in different contexts, colleagues who knew her well enough to speak candidly if pressed carefully. Some were hesitant, offering vague comments about her intense work ethic or high standards, but others dropped hints, almost accidentally, that made my heart skip a beat. Phrases like, she's very focused on the people she cares about, or Nisha has a way of getting involved, sometimes too deeply. I knew then that my instincts weren't wrong. This wasn't about professionalism or kindness. This was personal. The next step was more deliberate. I started going through public records, old social media accounts, anything that could provide a picture of who Nisha really was. I didn't know what I would find, but I needed the truth. And that's when I stumbled on something that froze me in place. A series of old posts on a personal account, photos from years ago, showing Nisha in settings I recognized. The same cafe where Arushi and I had met, the same park where we used to walk, even the library where we had spent late evenings reading. But what made it worse wasn't just that she had been there. It was that she had written in the captions about the boy with the kind eyes and the girl who would steal my world. My heart pounded. That boy with the kind eyes. Me. And the girl. Arushi. I couldn't believe it at first. I read and reread the posts, checking dates, cross-referencing every detail. It was undeniable. Nisha had known about us long before we even realized. She had watched. She had noticed. She had planned. A wave of anger and fear surged through me. How could someone be so obsessed, so calculating, that they waited years for the perfect moment to interfere? And now, with our child involved, the stakes had grown unimaginably high. I dug deeper. I discovered more. A photo of Nisha from a hospital years ago, the same hospital where Arushi had been treated for a minor illness. In the background, a younger me appeared in the photo, completely unaware. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. She had been present in our lives long before we thought she had entered. I started piecing together a timeline. Each interaction, each seemingly innocent gesture, suddenly took on a sinister hue. The calls, the texts, the sudden appearances at our appointments, they were all part of her obsessive monitoring. She hadn't been a random nurse assigned to help us. She had been waiting, watching, calculating. The more I uncovered, the more my mind raced with questions. How deep did her obsession go? Was this purely emotional? A twisted desire to be part of my life? Or had she been planning something more dangerous all along? I remembered the note I had glimpsed during labor, the one that made my blood run cold. Make sure he never gets her. At the time, I didn't understand the full meaning, but now it was chillingly clear. This wasn't just professional interference. This was personal. This was revenge. I had to confront the reality of it. I had to accept that someone we had trusted implicitly, someone we had invited into our most intimate moments, had been plotting against us. And yet, I couldn't stop there. I had to know why. I went further, reaching out to people who had worked with her in previous hospitals, colleagues who might shed light on her past behavior. Slowly, pieces of the puzzle fell into place. There were stories of intense attachments, of nurses who had left jobs suddenly, of unexplained conflicts that were never fully reported. All minor, all seemingly unrelated, until I connected them to my own experience. It was a pattern. Nisha had a history of fixations, of wanting control over people she considered hers. And now, with Arushi and our child, she had found the ultimate prize, the one person she wanted and could never have, and the life she could never create for herself. The discovery shook me. I felt a storm of emotions, anger, disbelief, fear, and a fierce protectiveness over my family. I had never realized that obsession could be so calculated, so patient, so cold. I knew one thing for certain. Nisha's past was the key to understanding her intentions. And the more I uncovered, the more I realized how close she had been to destroying everything I held dear. That night, I sat by the nursery, our baby sleeping peacefully in Arushi's arms, and I made a silent vow. I would protect my family. I would uncover the full truth, and I would make sure that the person who had tried to harm us faced justice. The perfect life we had once known had been tainted by obsession, by deceit, and by a betrayal that I never could have imagined. But I also realized something else. Knowledge was power, and with every piece of Nisha's past I uncovered, I was gaining the upper hand. The first threads of her obsession were now visible, and I knew that pulling them further would lead me to the full, disgusting truth of what she had done, and why. The storm wasn't over. It had only just begun. I never imagined I would discover a truth so vile that it would make my blood run cold. By now, I had pieced together enough of Nisha's past to realize she wasn't just obsessive. She was dangerous, and her obsession had a purpose. It all came together one evening when I decided to confront a former colleague of hers. I had found a phone number tucked away in an old record, someone who had worked closely with her at a previous hospital. I arranged to meet discreetly outside of the hospital, at a quiet cafe. The woman, older and cautious, looked around before speaking. Her voice trembled as she said, Nisha, she's always been obsessed. There was a man. She was in love with him years ago. She never got over it. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. Do you mean me? I asked, unable to stop the words. Her eyes widened. Yes, she followed him, literally. Wherever he went, she found a way to be there. And when he found someone else, someone like her didn't take it well, she became dangerous, manipulative. She can't handle rejection. I felt my stomach twist. That explained everything. Her constant presence during Arushi's pregnancy, the way she had intervened during labor, the subtle manipulations I had noticed but couldn't fully explain. This wasn't random. This was calculated. She wanted to hurt her, the woman continued, lowering her voice, to ruin the life of the woman he chose, to make sure she suffered, because if she couldn't have him, no one else should. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. My hands shook. My mind raced. Nisha's actions weren't mistakes. They weren't coincidences. She had been planning, waiting, manipulating, and the moment of Arushi's labor, the moment our family was most vulnerable, had been her target. I remembered that note I had glimpsed during labor. Make sure he never gets her. I had dismissed it at the time, thinking it might be harmless. Now the meaning was undeniable. She had wanted to harm Arushi, to ensure that the life we were building together was disrupted. I left the cafe, my mind spinning, walking through the city streets in a haze. The truth was repulsive, disgusting, and terrifying. This wasn't just obsession. This was active, premeditated betrayal, targeting the most vulnerable moment in my family's life. When I got home, I couldn't sleep. Arushi was resting, the baby sleeping in her arms, oblivious to the darkness that had crept into our lives. I sat in the nursery, staring at the child I had sworn to protect, and I felt rage simmering beneath my fear. How could someone be so cruel, so deliberate? How could someone I trusted come this close to destroying everything I loved? I replayed the labor night in my mind. The wrong dosage, the unnecessary delays, the controlling behavior, it all made sense now. Every subtle manipulation, every smile that seemed too calculating, every word of advice designed to guide Arushi into discomfort, it had been a part of her plan. And I realized something else. This wasn't just about her obsession with me. It was about power, control, and envy. Nisha had watched us live a life she could never have, and she wanted to take it from us. Our happiness, our family, our love, it was all something she couldn't tolerate. I felt a mixture of horror and determination. I couldn't undo what had happened, but I could ensure it didn't happen again. I had to protect Arushi, our child, and myself. I had to confront Nisha, not with violence, but with the full weight of the truth. Over the next few days, I prepared. I gathered evidence. I cross-checked every inconsistency, every manipulation, every small action that had seemed strange. I knew now that she was meticulous, but meticulous people leave traces, small footprints in the sand if you look closely enough. And I would follow those footprints until I reached the heart of her deceit. The disgusting truth had been revealed, and it was worse than I could have imagined. But with that truth came power, the knowledge that I could act, that I could protect my family, and that I could make sure Nisha could never hurt anyone again. I watched Arushi as she played with our baby, her smile bright, her laugh light. She had no idea how close we had come to disaster, and I vowed silently, fiercely, that she never would. The storm was coming, and I was ready to face it. I had rehearsed it 1,000 times in my head, but when the moment finally came, nothing could have prepared me for the rush of emotions. Anger, fear, betrayal, and a fierce determination to protect my family. I asked Arushi to rest for a while, telling her I needed to step out for a quick errand. In truth, I was going to confront Nisha, and I needed to do it before she could vanish or manipulate her way out. I found her in the staff lounge, reviewing notes as usual. Her cheerful smile greeted me, the one I had once found reassuring, and it now made my stomach twist with disgust. Nisha, I said, keeping my voice calm, almost too calm. We need to talk. She looked up, tilting her head slightly. Of course, she said, her tone light, masking whatever she might have felt underneath. About what? I closed the distance between us, my hands clenched at my sides. Don't play innocent. I know what you tried to do. I know about the labor, about the manipulations, about everything you've been planning. Her smile faltered for the briefest moment, a flicker in her eyes, but she recovered instantly. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, voice soft, measured. I was only doing my job. I took a deep breath, holding my anger in check. Your job? You nearly harmed my wife while she was giving birth. You gave her incorrect doses, delayed the doctor, manipulated her movements, all to make her suffer because you couldn't have me? Her expression didn't change, not outwardly, but I saw the subtle shift, a tightening of her jaw, a flicker of guilt or maybe fear. You don't understand. It wasn't about harming anyone. It was about, I was trying to help in my own way, she said, but the words sounded hollow even to her. I stepped closer, my voice firm. Help? You endangered my family? You violated the trust we gave you, the trust we thought you deserved. This isn't care, Nisha. This is obsession. This is betrayal. For the first time, I saw something break in her composure. Her eyes darted to the floor, then back at me, flickering between defiance and a sliver of fear. I just wanted to. I thought I couldn't let you go. Not to her, she whispered, voice cracking. The truth hit me like a hammer. She hadn't just been careless. She hadn't just been obsessive. She had been consumed by a twisted desire, one that put my wife and child at risk. My blood boiled. You don't get to justify this, I said, my voice shaking but controlled. You can't manipulate love or obsession into permission to hurt someone. Arushi is safe, because I was paying attention. And now you're going to leave. You're done here. You will not come near us again. She looked at me then, eyes wide, almost pleading. But I thought you'd see me differently. I thought if I helped. No, I shouted, the word cutting through the quiet lounge. You don't get to help through harm. You don't get to control lives that aren't yours. You are done. Do you understand? She swallowed hard, nodding slowly, the fight finally gone from her posture. I could see defeat, the realization that her plans had been exposed, that her obsession had been unveiled. I backed away, taking a breath. You're leaving, and you're never coming back. And if you try to interfere with my family again, I won't hesitate to involve the authorities. Her face went pale. She nodded again, a small, broken gesture. Without another word, she left the room, the click of the door echoing like a final punctuation mark in the nightmare she had created. As I walked back to the nursery, my hands still trembling slightly, I felt a mix of relief and lingering tension. Nisha was gone, for now, but the memory of her obsession, the knowledge of how close we had come to disaster, would stay with me forever. I entered the nursery and saw Arushi cradling our baby, softly humming a lullaby. I knelt beside her, taking her hand in mine, and whispered, It's over. You're safe. We're safe. She looked at me, sleep-deprived but smiling, and I felt a wave of love and protectiveness wash over me. I had faced the threat, uncovered the betrayal, and defended the people I loved most. That night, as I watched them both sleep, I knew the storm had passed, but the lessons remained. Trust is precious, but vigilance is necessary. Love can protect, but courage must enforce it. And sometimes, confronting darkness directly is the only way to safeguard what truly matters. I had faced Nisha, and I had won, but the experience had changed me forever, sharpened my instincts, deepened my understanding of human obsession, and reminded me that betrayal often comes from the people you least expect. And as I held our child close, I promised silently that no one would ever threaten our family again. The days after Nisha's departure were heavy, but they were also filled with relief. The shadow that had loomed over our family for months, the tension, the fear, the uncertainty, finally began to lift. Arushi and I spent the first quiet morning together in the nursery, watching our baby sleep. The soft rise and fall of the little chest, the warmth of tiny hands clutching ours, made everything else fade away. It reminded me of why I had fought so hard to uncover the truth, why I had endured fear and sleepless nights. We talked openly about everything, the fear, the doubts, and the betrayal. Arushi admitted she had sensed something off but had dismissed it, trusting the person we thought we could rely on. I shared every detail I had uncovered, every observation, every inconsistency. Talking it through was painful, but it was also healing. I can't believe someone could come this close to hurting us, she said softly, her voice trembling but resolute. I know, I replied, squeezing her hand. But we faced it. We didn't let fear control us, and we'll never let anyone threaten us like that again. The process of healing wasn't instantaneous. There were sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and flashes of anger whenever I thought of Nisha's obsession. But step by step, we rebuilt a sense of normalcy. We created routines, small rituals that strengthened our bond as a family. Feeding times, bedtime stories, evening walks. Each moment became a declaration that our lives belonged to us, not to fear or obsession. I also made a promise to myself to remain vigilant, but not paranoid, to trust, but wisely. Arushi and I spoke openly about boundaries and trust, about how to protect our family without letting fear dominate our lives. Every conversation, every shared smile, every quiet laugh became a thread in the fabric of our renewed life. Slowly, we let ourselves dream again. We imagined birthdays, first steps, holidays, milestones we had feared might never arrive safely. And as we envisioned those moments, the love we had for each other and for our child grew stronger, fortified by the trials we had endured. One evening, as Arushi rocked the baby to sleep, I sat beside her, reflecting on the journey we had taken. We've been through a storm, I said softly, but it made us stronger. We survived it, and we've built something that can't be taken from us. She smiled, resting her head against mine. I've never felt safer, she whispered. Not just because the danger is gone, but because we faced it together, and that's what matters. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to truly breathe. The fear was still a memory, but it no longer had power over our lives. We were no longer victims of manipulation or obsession. We were a family, resilient, united, and stronger than before. As the days turned into weeks, I continued to reflect on the experience, realizing how much it had taught me about trust, vigilance, and love. I had learned that betrayal can come from unexpected places, but courage, awareness, and commitment to family can overcome it. We celebrated small victories, the baby's first smile, Arushi's regained peace of mind, the quiet joy of simply being together without fear. Every moment became a reminder of what truly mattered: love, trust, and the determination to protect the people who make life worth living. And in those quiet, peaceful nights, As I watched my family sleep safely, I understood something fundamental. Healing is not just about surviving pain. It's about reclaiming joy, rebuilding trust, and moving forward with the knowledge that nothing, no fear, no betrayal, could break the bond we had forged. Our life wasn't perfect anymore. It had been tested and scarred, but it was ours, and it was beautiful. Months had passed since the storm had hit our lives, but the memories remained vivid. Every fear, every doubt, every moment of uncertainty. I often found myself reflecting on the journey, trying to understand what it had taught me about love, trust, and human nature. The first lesson was clear. Trust is precious, but it must be earned, not assumed. Nisha had infiltrated our lives under the guise of care, and we had believed in her without question. That blind trust had brought danger dangerously close. I learned that vigilance is not paranoia. It is responsibility, especially when protecting those you love. The second lesson was about love and resilience. Arushi and I had faced fear together, and it had tested our bond in ways we could never have anticipated. Yet through every sleepless night, every doubt, every challenge, we had emerged stronger. Love isn't just about joy, it's about endurance, courage, and the willingness to fight for each other. The third lesson was about the human mind, how obsession can distort reality and twist intentions. Nisha's actions had been calculated, deliberate, and deeply personal, but her obsession also revealed something profound. People are capable of extremes, and the heart can harbor both love and destruction simultaneously. Understanding that complexity helped me navigate the fear, turning it into determination rather than despair. I also realized the power of awareness and action. Observing details, questioning inconsistencies, and seeking the truth had been what ultimately protected my family. Knowledge had been my weapon, vigilance my shield, and while the process had been painful, it had empowered me to take control of a situation that could have otherwise spiraled out of control. Most importantly, I learned the value of gratitude and presence. Holding our baby, watching Arushi laugh again, witnessing the small victories of daily life. These were the moments that mattered. Life had tested us, but it had also reminded us to cherish every second, to protect what is truly precious, and to never take love for granted. As I shared these reflections with friends and family, I realized that our story, while personal, carried universal truths. Betrayal, deceit, and danger are real, but so are courage, love, and the ability to rise above adversity. Life doesn't just test us. It shapes us, strengthens us, and teaches us lessons we might never have sought but desperately need. Sitting by the nursery window one quiet evening, I watched the sun set over the city, painting the sky with shades of gold and rose. Arushi and our baby were asleep, safe and peaceful, and I felt a calm settle over me. The storm had passed, but the wisdom it left behind would guide us forever. I whispered to myself, a vow more than a statement. We survived. We learned. We will protect, love, and cherish each other no matter what comes next. And in that moment, I understood the final truth. Life's storms are inevitable, but how we weather them, with love, vigilance, and courage, defines everything. We had faced darkness, uncovered betrayal, and come out stronger. And as I closed my eyes that night, I knew that no force could take away the strength, resilience, and love we had fought to preserve. The morning light spilled into our home, warm and gentle, as if the world itself was welcoming us into a fresh chapter. The storm had passed, the shadows of fear and betrayal behind us, and our lives were finally ours to reclaim. Arushi was in the kitchen, humming softly, as our baby giggled in the playpen nearby. I watched them for a moment, feeling a surge of gratitude so strong it made my chest ache. We had endured fear, deceit, and manipulation, yet here we were, safe, intact, and stronger than ever. "Good morning," Arushi said, smiling as I entered. Her eyes held the same warmth I had fallen in love with, but now there was a calm certainty there too, a peace born from survival and trust restored. "Good morning," I replied, kneeling to kiss our baby's tiny forehead. "Ready for a new day?" The baby cooed and reached for me, tiny fingers curling around mine. I laughed softly, a sound of pure joy, and realized that these little moments were the most precious of all. They were proof that love had endured, that family had prevailed, and that we had reclaimed our lives from the darkness that had threatened them. Over the next few weeks, we settled into a rhythm that felt natural and healing. We celebrated milestones, the first laugh, the first crawl, the first unsteady steps, each one a reminder of our resilience and the strength of our bond. Every small victory was a triumph over fear, every smile a testament to the power of love. I also reflected on the lessons we had learned. Trust must be earned, vigilance is essential, and love is worth protecting fiercely. But perhaps the most important lesson was this: life is fragile, and those we love are irreplaceable. Every day we share together is a gift, one that should be cherished without reservation. One afternoon, Arushi and I sat together on the balcony, our baby asleep nearby, the city buzzing softly below. We spoke about the future, the dreams we had, the plans we wanted to pursue, the life we envisioned as a family. There were no shadows looming over us, no hidden dangers, only the promise of new beginnings, and the assurance that we were stronger together. "I feel like we've truly started over," Arushi said, leaning against me, "like we've built something unshakable." "You're right," I replied, wrapping an arm around her. "The past taught us lessons, yes, but the future? The future is ours to create, and nothing can take that from us. As I looked down at our baby, sleeping peacefully in Arushi's arms, I felt a sense of completion and hope unlike anything I had ever known. We had faced betrayal, fear, and danger. We had confronted it, survived it, and learned from it. And now, we were free. Free to love, to laugh, and to live fully. Life would continue to have challenges, no doubt, but we knew we could face them together, stronger, wiser, and united. Every heartbeat, every hug, every shared smile was a declaration. Our family had survived, endured, and emerged triumphant. And as the sun set that evening, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, I whispered quietly to myself, a vow and a promise. This is our beginning. A life built on love, trust, and courage. Nothing can take that away. We had survived the storm, uncovered the darkness, and now we embraced the light. A new chapter had begun, and it was ours. Beautiful, unbroken, and full of hope.